Labor's backbench say the humanitarian mission first conceived by the government has now morphed into war. But Mr Abbott is arguing that saving innocent life in the Middle East and responding to the growing global terrorist threat to Australians are in fact humanitarian aims. Political correspondent Tom Eagleton reports from Canberra.
The US Secretary of State's calling it a war.
The Prime Minister started by saying there would be no boots on the ground.
The Greens are calling it war and say the case for joining it hasn't been made.
This war has no time frame attached to it, except getting involved in another quagmire in the Middle East.
Look, different people use their own language.
This is a humanitarian mission in the first instance.
Unlike the last decision to deploy to the Middle East, this one has Labor's support.
Is it okay to go? No, that's all right. Right. It's like R2-D2.
The questions are already being raised in opposition ranks about exactly what Labor has signed up for.
Australia and the US have become ever more embedded in each other's military communications. By joining WGS, Australia is now part of the US system like never before.
Australia is going to be deeply involved in this. It changes our relationship to the region because no one else is involved in this but Australia in the region, and that will have a huge impact over long term.
I am very concerned that the government has so quickly escalated Australia's involvement in Iraq from strictly humanitarian protection to now committing Australia to what appears to be an open-ended war that will only increase the security threat to Australians.
It is wrong. It is against God. It is against religion. I'm not saying that this will be over in weeks or even necessarily in just a few months. And combat operations inside Syria, which is effectively ungoverned space and whose government Australia does not actually recognise.
The deployment of the 8 Super Hornet jet fighters and 600 troops will cost, according to one estimate from the Lowy Institute, around $400 million a year.
The Australian preference is to keep the Australian population in the dark and tell them very little about it.
Preference holding good in the first stage.